Raw, chaotic handheld footage of a crowded New York City street. The noise of the avenue is deafening. Suddenly, the frame freezes. The audio drops to a cold, synthetic hum. A digital targeting reticle snaps onto the face of a random pedestrian in the crowd. In exactly 3 seconds, their entire digital life cascades down the screen. Name, home address, high school graduation photos, tagged ex-partners. A terrifying, non-stop data dump bleeding over the frozen image. This is not a sequence out of a Hollywood science fiction film. This is a live, real-time demonstration of a weaponized neural network. A mathematical beast that is currently active right now on the personal smartphones of thousands of police officers across the country. The barrier between your physical body and your permanent digital record has been completely annihilated. The target on the screen did absolutely nothing wrong, yet their anonymity is totally destroyed. Look at the screen and understand the reality of your situation. While you are watching this, you are already locked inside the database. Every smiling selfie, every blurry background appearance in a friend's vacation video, every forgotten profile picture from a decade ago. It has all been harvested without your consent. There is no opt-out button. The moment you step outside your front door, your face becomes a biometric key. That key instantly unlocks your entire life history to absolutely anyone holding the right software. I am dragging you directly onto the digital front lines of the most dangerous, invisible war of our time. We will infiltrate the architecture of this planetary-scale surveillance machine. You will learn the terrifying mechanics of how the algorithm works, why the international legal system failed to stop it, and how to understand the biometric trap you are currently caught in. The front line is not a street. It is a dark, freezing data center. Endless rows of obsidian server racks stretch into the shadows, flashing with rhythmic blue and green lights. The roar of industrial cooling fans is absolutely deafening, pulling the heat from overclocked processors. An open-source intelligence investigator connects a reinforced terminal to the mainframe. Their hands move quickly over the keyboard, driven by adrenaline and the sheer scale of the breach they are witnessing. Through the investigator's eyes, the scrolling logs on the screen are not just code. They are a digital feeding frenzy. An automated script is running at maximum capacity, downloading hundreds of human faces per second from public web pages. It is a relentless, automated strip mining of human identity. The investigator recognizes the sophisticated architecture of the code immediately. This is not a glitch. This is a highly coordinated, militarized extraction of biometric data. The raw numbers appearing on the terminal are staggering. A rogue startup managed to scrape an astonishing 30 billion images from the open web. They bypassed the standard boundaries of the Internet, effectively building a permanent, searchable visual index of humanity. The investigator watches the total counter tick upwards, realizing that this private company has unilaterally mapped the human race. The sheer volume of data is a structural threat to global security. To comprehend the gravity of that number, you have to break it down. 30 billion images equate to roughly 4 distinct pictures for every single human being alive on Earth today. The investigator stares at the blinking cursor, processing the mathematical reality of total exposure. You do not need to be an active Internet user to be caught in this net. The algorithm only needs a fraction of a visual footprint to lock onto your identity and cement you into the matrix forever. This operation was executed with terrifying tactical precision. The scrapers functioned like digital locusts, swarming over social media platforms, news sites, and personal blogs. They effortlessly bypassed standard terms of service, treating privacy policies like minor speed bumps. The investigator traces the network pathways, seeing exactly how the code masked its origin. It was a digital ghost, striking platforms simultaneously from thousands of different vectors. To avoid triggering automated defense systems, the software was specifically designed to evade rate limits. It achieved this by routing its massive traffic through millions of proxy Internet Protocol addresses. The investigator maps the paper trail, watching the connections bounce across global servers. It looked like legitimate traffic, hiding the largest data heist in human history within the everyday noise of the Internet. The security protocols were entirely blind to the swarm. The most chilling aspect of this breach is the minimal physical infrastructure required to execute it. A single optimized server rack, operating quietly in the shadows of a rented warehouse, was the only weapon needed. The investigator examines the hardware logs, noting the terrifying efficiency of the code. You do not need a massive government agency to destroy public anonymity anymore. You just need a few dozen cubic feet of high-end processors and a ruthless mathematical logic. That single, unassuming server rack was capable of an unimaginable throughput. It could ingest and process over 100 million photos in just 24 hours. The investigator watches the historical data flow, visualizing the daily harvest. Millions of faces pulled from servers, stripped of their original context, and neatly filed into a proprietary database. Every passing day meant another massive chunk of the global population permanently lost their right to hide. The investigator leans back from the terminal, the cold air of the server room biting at their skin. The logs tell a story of absolute, unchecked power. This was not a slow, creeping erosion of our civil liberties. It was a lightning strike. A private entity, armed with predatory algorithms, weaponized the open web against the very people who built it. The concept of an unrecorded life was quietly assassinated by lines of code running on a loop in a dark room. We are standing at the epicenter of a planetary-scale violation of privacy. The sheer, incomprehensible scale of the data theft is laid bare on these monitors. The machine swallowed our memories, our passing glances, and our digital footprints, fusing them into a master key. The investigator knows the most terrifying part is not just the technology itself, but the silence that accompanied its deployment. No alarms rang. No legislation was passed. No public debate was held. This is the silent catastrophe experts now call the Great Scrape. It is the chilling story of how a single, unregulated private company downloaded the Internet, systematically harvesting the face of the world without a single person noticing. The trap was set in plain sight, fueled by our own data. And by the time the rest of humanity finally realized what had been taken from them, it was already far too late to stop the machine. The hunt had officially begun. The hunt had officially begun, but raw data is just noise. 30 billion photographs are a chaotic ocean, useless to a predator without a way to filter the blood from the water. I watched the system inhale this staggering volume of human history, realizing the sheer scale of the incoming threat. The machine needed to digest us. It needed to strip away the context, the smiles, the memories, and leave only the lethal, actionable intelligence behind. Look at a photograph of yourself. You see a memory, a specific moment frozen in time. The algorithm sees a target. Right now, a digital wireframe slams down over your image. Blinding neon lines snap across your features, connecting your eyes, your nose, your jawline. The humanity is aggressively purged from the frame. The machine does not care if you are laughing or crying. It is hunting for the underlying architecture of your biological skull. This is where the violent extraction happens. The algorithm maps between 75 and 100 specific nodal points on your face. It measures the precise, microscopic distance between your pupils. It calculates the exact, unchangeable angle of your cheekbones and the depth of your eye sockets. These are not features you can easily disguise with a pair of glasses or a different haircut. This is the biometric skeleton you cannot ever hide. We are watching a biological hijacking unfold in real time. Every millimeter of your face is locked in, scanned, and processed at speeds that defy human comprehension. The camera rotates aggressively around this digital wireframe as it begins to distort. The image of the human being collapses completely, shattering into a chaotic storm of raw data. We are no longer looking at a person. We are looking at a permanent mathematical vulnerability. The flesh is gone. Your identity is dragged into an empty, pitch-black void and reconstructed as a complex equation. Those 75 biological measurements are instantly converted into a unique string of numbers. In the surveillance industry, this weaponized code is known as a faceprint. You have just been reduced to a single, inescapable coordinate, floating inside a terrifying 512-dimensional mathematical vector. A space with 512 directions is a geometry of total surveillance that the human mind cannot even picture. But the artificial intelligence navigates this dark architecture effortlessly. Inside this sprawling mathematical grid, your specific faceprint is pinned to a singular, exact location. It is a permanent digital anchor. Once you are mapped into this matrix, you can never organically move or delete yourself from the crosshairs. Because your identity is now pure mathematics, the traditional rules of disguise are completely dead. The system does not need a clear, well-lit portrait to find you. It thrives on the imperfect garbage of the real world. A grainy, pixelated still frame pulled from a cheap security camera over 100 feet away is enough. The algorithm simply translates that blurry shadow back into the 512-dimensional coordinate space. Once the machine maps the geometry of that blurry shadow, it fires the coordinates into the void. It instantly connects the low-quality street footage to that high-definition professional portrait you uploaded to a corporate website 5 years ago. The connection is brutal and instantaneous. The algorithm strips away the darkness, the distance, and the poor resolution, linking the anonymous figure in the alley directly to your front door. The precision of this digital sniper is absolutely staggering. We are not talking about probable cause or a reasonable guess. In highly controlled, independent tests, this specific vector mapping architecture achieved a terrifying 99.8% accuracy rate. Let that number sink in. 998 times out of 1,000, the machine makes a flawless, lethal identification. The margin for error is effectively zero. I have stood in war zones where a single misidentified target leads to total catastrophe. Apply that level of relentless targeting to civilian streets, operating 24 hours a day without fatigue. The 99.8% accuracy rate means the artificial intelligence is a better eyewitness than any human who has ever lived. It never forgets a geometry, it never blinks, and it never gets confused by the chaos of a moving crowd. This mathematical conversion is the ultimate breach of trust. When your physical features are turned into a static coordinate, the very concept of walking down a street unnoticed evaporates. You are broadcasting your identity with every step you take. The air around you is thick with invisible tripwires, pulling your biometric signature into the cloud before you even realize a camera is pointed in your direction. The front line is everywhere. We assumed our faces belonged to us. We thought our physical bodies were the last sanctuary of privacy. But the moment the code shattered your image into a 512-dimensional vector, that ownership was permanently revoked. Your face is now a tracking beacon, engineered by a rogue intelligence to ensure you can be pinpointed anywhere on Earth. The machine does not see a citizen. It sees a coordinate waiting to be violently logged. This abstract mathematical violence inside the black void was just the calibration phase. The real nightmare begins when this perfectly tuned, frictionless algorithm is ripped from the servers and weaponized in the physical world. The coordinate system is about to collide with the chaos of human life. We are taking this God mode technology out of the vacuum and dropping it directly onto the brutal, bleeding pavement of a modern city street. We take that cold, flawless mathematics out of the sterile server void and hurl it straight into the chaos of a midnight street protest. The air is thick with tear gas and the scream of sirens. A line of riot police advances, shields locked. But the real weapon is not the baton or the flashbang. It is the glowing screen of a standard-issue smartphone held high above the tactical formation, sweeping across the frantic crowd like the eye of a drone. Through the lens of an open-source investigator monitoring the feed, the horror of this asymmetrical warfare becomes instantly clear. Red targeting boxes snap onto the faces of shouting protesters in real time. Within milliseconds, augmented reality overlays their full legal names and home addresses floating above their heads. This is the absolute privatization of police intelligence. A rogue startup just handed God mode tracking capabilities to a beat cop. I watched the data stream flood the officer's screen. The algorithm cuts through the smoke, the erratic shadows, and the blur of moving bodies. It does not care about the adrenaline or the panic of the front line. It only sees the geometry we uncovered earlier. The 512-dimensional vectors lock onto a target. Anonymity on this pavement has been shattered. The protective cover of the crowd, the oldest defense mechanism in human history, is gone. This tactical deployment did not happen through a transparent democratic process. By the year 2021, over 3,100 law enforcement agencies across the United States were secretly using this exact software. There were no public hearings. There was no legislative approval. The most invasive surveillance apparatus ever constructed was quietly downloaded onto the personal cell phones of patrol officers like a cheap mobile game. The scale of this silent infiltration is staggering. Thousands of departments, from rural sheriffs to federal task forces, plugged directly into a rogue, unregulated neural network. I track the digital paper trail of subscription receipts and hidden budgets. The chain of command was completely bypassed. State power was outsourced to a private algorithm, creating a shadow network of surveillance that operated entirely in the dark, immune to constitutional oversight. The speed of this biometric weapon changes the fundamental physics of an encounter. An officer in the field could snap a photograph from 30 feet away, entirely unnoticed by the subject, and receive a confirmed identity match in under 5 seconds. 5 seconds. That is the exact lifespan of your physical privacy. In the time it takes you to draw a breath and look over your shoulder, your entire personal history has already been pulled from the cloud. I've monitored combat zones where target identification takes hours of verified signal intelligence. Here, on the civilian front line, the artificial intelligence executes the strike before the suspect even knows they are being hunted. It is a relentless, automated ambush. The officer does not need to ask for your identification or establish probable cause. The machine has already interrogated your face from across the street and stripped you of your right to remain silent. But the true terror lies in the target list itself. Traditional law enforcement relies on criminal registries. You had to be booked and fingerprinted to enter the system. This algorithm bypassed that entirely. Because the underlying database was built by scraping public social media, it included hundreds of millions of people who had never committed a crime. The dragnet swallowed everyone. You do not need a rap sheet to be in this terrifying digital lineup. If you have ever uploaded a smiling photo to a blog, attended a public marathon, or stood in the background of a friend's vacation video, you are in the crosshairs. The concept of innocence offers zero protection against the machine. The artificial intelligence treats the mundane memories of your life as a dormant police file waiting to be activated. The investigator sees the horrifying truth. The system does not track criminals. It tracks the entire human population. This is the exact moment the illusion of freedom collapses. You step off the curb thinking you are just another face in the metropolis. But the silent, invisible grid has already mapped your geometry, matched it to a decade-old social media post, and broadcast your location to a server halfway across the country. The architecture of this digital prison is so flawless, so mathematically absolute, that fighting it feels like trying to punch the wind. We are witnessing the weaponization of our own digital reflections, turning everyday civilians into permanent targets. If this scale of algorithmic power blows your mind as much as it terrifies the experts, hit the like button right now. To ensure you do not miss the truth about how this technology is mutating, subscribe to the channel. And I want to know your thoughts. Do you think public anonymity can ever be legally restored? Let me know down in the comments. Back on the chaotic street, the protest escalates. A flashbang detonates, illuminating the smoke in harsh, blinding white. But the software does not flinch. The neural network operates completely insulated from the physical violence. The targeting boxes remain locked on. I am watching the raw data flow through the encrypted channels, and the realization hits like a physical blow. The police are no longer just patrolling the neighborhood. They are actively mining it. Every face that passes by a squad car is scanned, logged, and quantified. The citizens are unaware that they are bleeding biometric data into a privately owned reservoir. This is a one-way extraction of human identity. When state authorities can instantly demystify any crowd, the fundamental balance of power in a society snaps. The chilling effect is instantaneous. The mere rumor of this technology is enough to keep a frightened populace locked inside their homes. The investigator stares at the cascading wall of matches on the monitor. The sheer volume of successful identifications defies logic. It is a terrifying glimpse into a future where hiding is physically impossible. The machine transforms the chaotic, unpredictable energy of a massive urban environment into a perfectly indexed, searchable database. Flesh and blood are reduced to searchable queries. We are watching the real-time death of the unknown citizen. The algorithm has conquered the open street, turning the public square into an open-air panopticon. But the true psychological devastation occurs when this inescapable dragnet moves indoors. The absolute certainty of the mathematical vector is about to be weaponized inside a locked room where context is stripped away and a single false positive can destroy a life. The street is just the hunting ground. The real nightmare happens after the arrest is made. The heavy metal door slams shut, sealing off the noise of the street. The air inside this interrogation room is stale, suffocating. I am watching the true front line of this digital war shift from the chaotic pavement to a harsh, fluorescent-lit table. The detective does not slide a traditional mugshot across the scratched steel surface. He slides a printed photograph of a suspect drinking coffee at a corner cafe 3 years ago. Look closely at this photograph. It was never meant to be a police record. It was scraped from the background of a complete stranger's forgotten travel blog. This is the terrifying collapse of context. The algorithm has reached into the past and weaponized an entirely innocent memory. The suspect's eyes widen in absolute horror as they realize the perimeter is breached. Their personal history is no longer their own property. The legal protection of innocence is being dismantled right in front of us. By scraping the open web, the machine has drafted you into what forensic specialists now call the perpetual lineup. You are no longer just a civilian going about your day. Every single time a new piece of security footage is uploaded anywhere in the country, your face is silently interrogated against the suspect profile. You are being investigated every second. This is a relentless, automated cross-examination running in the dark servers we saw earlier. The machine does not sleep, and it does not require a warrant to compare your 512-dimensional vector to a blurry shoplifter caught on camera. You are standing in a digital police lineup alongside millions of other unaware citizens. The burden of proof has quietly shifted. You are now a latent suspect, waiting for a mathematical trigger. When that mathematical trigger finally snaps, the human element of justice completely breaks down. Psychological studies reveal a devastating vulnerability in modern law enforcement. The moment a detective sees an algorithmic match flash on their screen, it triggers massive confirmation bias. The software acts with such an aura of objective, computational certainty that human investigators immediately override their own professional judgment. The detective sitting across this metal table is no longer looking for the truth. He's looking for a way to make the machine's prediction fit the reality of the crime. If the neural network declares a match, the investigator assumes the suspect must be guilty of something. The presumption of innocence evaporates. Alibis are ignored. Evidence that contradicts the computer is dismissed as an anomaly. The algorithm becomes the absolute judge. But the artificial intelligence driving this interrogation is severely compromised. Underneath the slick interface and the high-speed processing, the core architecture is bleeding with human error. The original training data fed into these neural networks was heavily skewed, scraped from a predominantly homogeneous demographic pool. The software simply does not know how to accurately read the nuanced biological topography of every human being. This catastrophic flaw means the system generates false positive matches that disproportionately affect minority demographics. When the biometric coordinates fail to align perfectly, the algorithm panics and simply guesses, pulling the nearest available vector. It is a mathematical error, a tiny rounding mistake deep inside the code. But out here, in the physical world, that glitch translates into a heavily armed strike team kicking down your front door. We are tracking verified, documented cases of wrongful arrest and extended detention based entirely on a faulty string of numbers. Innocent people are being handcuffed, thrown into holding cells, and forced into exhausting legal battles because a server mistook their cheekbone angle for that of a wanted fugitive. The code is literally depriving citizens of their freedom. This is not a dystopian simulation. This is the reality of modern policing. Look at the suspect trembling in the harsh light of this interrogation room. How do you defend yourself against a mathematical formula you are not legally allowed to examine? You cannot cross-examine a proprietary neural network. You cannot demand that the software take the witness stand. The corporate developers hide behind trade secrets, leaving the victim trapped in a legal black hole, fighting an invisible accuser that cannot be reasoned with. The fallout from these false positives destroys families, bankrupts individuals, and shatters communities. A single misidentification echoes through the system, creating a permanent criminal record that will flag you every time you apply for a job or board a flight. The algorithm does not apologize when the charges are eventually dropped. It simply recalibrates and moves on to its next target, leaving a trail of ruined lives in its wake. The most terrifying aspect of this battlefield is that the commanders refuse to acknowledge the collateral damage. Police departments continue to renew their software licenses, addicted to the speed and the illusion of absolute control. They are willingly outsourcing their deductive reasoning to a flawed, black box intelligence. We have surrendered the very concept of human justice to a web scraper built by a reckless startup. This claustrophobic room is just the domestic front. The true horror of this technology scales far beyond local police precincts and wrongful civilian arrests. If you think this software is dangerous in the hands of a biased detective, wait until you see what happens when it is deployed into an active combat zone. The exact same mathematical framework that framed an innocent citizen is currently being uploaded to military-grade tablets on the front line. The exact same mathematical framework that framed an innocent citizen is currently being uploaded to military-grade tablets on the front line. Now the concrete of the precinct is replaced by the freezing mud of a trench in Eastern Europe. Artillery shells shatter the horizon, shaking the ground. The scale of the threat has violently expanded. We are no longer talking about local police precincts. This is a live combat zone, and the algorithm is deployed. To the embedded correspondent, the real terror is not the deafening roar of the mortar fire overhead. It is the absolute silence of the digital execution happening in the dirt. A soldier steps over a fallen enemy combatant. The casualty is stripped of their dog tags, effectively an unknown ghost of a chaotic front line. But the soldier does not search for physical identification. They simply raise a ruggedized tablet and point the camera at the mud-streaked face. In a fraction of a second, the tablet screen flashes. The algorithm locks onto the biological coordinates, ignoring the blood and the dirt. It cross-references the 512-dimensional vector against the global database. This is the biometric battlefield. We have taken a tool originally designed for domestic surveillance and forged it into a devastating weapon of modern warfare. The digital dragnet has officially been weaponized for global conflict. The results from this tactical deployment are staggering. During the conflict in Ukraine, military units did not rely on standard intelligence gathering to map the enemy dead. They unleashed the private scraping algorithm directly onto the battlefield. The software scoured its ocean of harvested data, matching the faces of dead combatants to the smiling, completely public social media profiles they left behind in peacetime. The past and the present violently collide. The neural network operated with a terrifying, relentless efficiency. Operating under the chaos of active artillery strikes, the database was deployed to identify over 8,600 fallen enemy soldiers. 8,600 human beings, stripped of their anonymity in the very moment of their death. The algorithm tore through the fog of war, rendering traditional methods of concealing troop casualties mathematically obsolete in a matter of seconds. You might assume a system trained on perfectly lit selfies would fail in the brutal reality of a trench. The correspondent watches the tablet process a face that is barely recognizable to the human eye. But the machine does not see a human being. It sees nodal points. It sees the unalterable distance between a shattered cheekbone and a bruised jawline. The code is entirely indifferent to the physical destruction of the human body. It only searches for the underlying math. The data recovered from these combat deployments revealed a chilling technical breakthrough. The neural network proved resilient enough to return highly accurate identity matches even when the subject's face had sustained up to 30% traumatic physical damage. Think about the gravity of that. Nearly a third of the biological structure can be obliterated by shrapnel, and the algorithm will still successfully reconstruct the ghost of the identity from the wreckage. But identifying the dead was only the initial phase of the operation. The true horror of the biometric battlefield is what happens immediately after the match is confirmed. The tablet does not just store the name in a classified military file. It actively weaponizes the identification. The software bypasses the traditional regulated channels of the Red Cross or official government notification protocols. It goes straight for the civilian jugular, completely unfiltered. In a ruthless escalation of tactics, the software was actively used to wage psychological warfare on the home front. Automated scripts took the confirmed identities and immediately linked them to the victims' families. The system began automatically sending images of the deceased, taken right there in the muddy trench, directly to their relatives' social media inboxes. A brutal, inescapable notification of death delivered by a cold, unfeeling string of code. From the perspective of the frontline reporter, this is a catastrophic shift in the rules of engagement. You are no longer just fighting the soldiers in front of you. You are launching a targeted, algorithmically guided psychological strike against thousands of grieving mothers, wives, and children hundreds of miles away. The trauma of the front line is instantly teleported into civilian living rooms, bypassing all borders and psychological defenses without warning. This ruthless deployment proves our darkest fears about the technology. The startup did not just build a tool for catching shoplifters. They built a planetary-scale infrastructure that can be seamlessly integrated into global warfare within hours. The architecture requires no specialized military hardware. Any infantryman with a commercially available smartphone and a cellular connection immediately becomes an active node in this unstoppable surveillance panopticon. We are witnessing the absolute democratization of highly advanced, unregulated biometric targeting. And the terrifying truth is that the developers in their comfortable Silicon Valley offices have absolutely no control over how their creation is utilized in the mud. Once the algorithmic weapon is unleashed into the wild, it dictates its own terms of engagement. The code is completely agnostic to human suffering. It only cares about executing the mathematical match. If a private database can successfully identify thousands of mangled casualties in a foreign war zone, what chance does a civilian have of hiding from it in a peaceful city? The boundary between the military battlefield and the domestic street has been permanently erased. The exact same infrastructure tracking enemy combatants is silently running in the background of your local shopping mall. The net is tightening around us all, and there is nowhere left to run. The sheer velocity of this technological proliferation is staggering. We are moving too fast, adopting these systems without any understanding of the long-term societal fallout. The front line is everywhere. Your face is the ultimate liability, a vulnerability that cannot be patched or encrypted. We have voluntarily uploaded the targeting coordinates for our own destruction. And now, the automated drones are simply following the math to its inevitable conclusion. The blood in the trenches of Eastern Europe proves that this is no longer a hypothetical privacy debate. The machine has tasted the ultimate power of life and death, and it is hungry for more data. But as the bodies pile up and the psychological warfare escalates, civil society is waking up to the nightmare. Desperate attempts are being made to rip the plug from the wall. We are about to see what happens when the legal system tries to kill an immortal algorithm. Pull out of the mud and into the sterile battlefield of a late-night law office. The air is thick with the scent of stale coffee and desperation. Desk lamps illuminate mountains of legal briefs, barricades of paper meant to stop a digital blitzkrieg. A privacy defense lawyer, eyes bloodshot from a 72-hour sprint, stares down a court order. They hit send on a federal injunction. The front line has suddenly shifted from the trenches to the courtroom. But this is a war fought in milliseconds, not months. On a nearby monitor tracking the startup's server architecture, we see the real-time impact of that injunction. A microscopic cluster of digital files is deleted. A superficial, fleeting victory. Yet, towering above these deleted files, the massive, glowing core of the neural network remains completely untouched. The machine barely registers the strike. It is a terrifying realization of absolute vulnerability. This is the lethal paradox of the modern surveillance state, the nightmare keeping me awake on the digital front line. We are confronting the legal fiction of algorithmic disgorgement. The horrifying truth is that deleting the data does not delete the knowledge. The law assumes that forcing a company to trash your photograph restores your privacy. But the machine has already consumed your identity. We are firing blanks at an entity that has mutated beyond our laws. The counteroffensive started with massive legislative artillery. European regulators recognized the existential threat of this borderless biometric dragnet. They slammed the rogue startup with catastrophic penalties, issuing fines exceeding $22 million. The mandate was clear and uncompromising. Immediately locate and permanently delete all scraped data belonging to European Union citizens. It sounded like a decisive, fatal blow to the operation. The legislation was celebrated as a definitive victory for human rights. The regulators believed they had successfully ripped the plug from the wall. But down in the digital trenches, the reality is far more bleak. These lawyers are fighting a 21st century algorithmic war using obsolete 20th century paper weapons. A fine of $22 million is just the cost of doing business when you hold the biometric keys to the entire global population. The legal system slammed into a devastating technical reality known as algorithmic disgorgement. You cannot simply serve a subpoena to a string of code. You cannot command a fully trained neural network to suddenly forget what it has painstakingly learned. The artificial intelligence does not store your face in a neat, easily erasable folder. It fundamentally absorbs the geometry of your identity, weaving your features deeply into its core operational logic. We established earlier how the system converts human flesh into a 512-dimensional vector. Once that conversion happens, the mathematical weights inside the artificial intelligence are permanently altered. Every scraped face adjusts the synaptic connections of the machine. The damage is irrevocably baked into the architecture. Your biometric signature has already tuned the algorithm, making it sharper, faster, and infinitely more lethal. Here is the brutal tactical truth from the digital front line. Deleting the original photo does not erase the biometric capability of the network. The source image is now completely irrelevant. The photograph is just the disposable scaffolding used to construct the mathematical weapon. Tearing down the scaffolding after the sniper tower is built does absolutely nothing to stop the bullets. The network's ability to hunt you remains perfectly intact. It is exactly like burning a highly classified textbook, only after the enemy spy has completely memorized every single page. The raw data is gone, but the lethal knowledge has already been weaponized. The court-ordered deletion is nothing but a comfortable legal placebo. It provides a false sense of security to a terrified public, while the underlying surveillance engine continues to operate at maximum capacity in the shadows. We are left entirely unprotected. To truly comply with the strict parameters of the law, there is only one extreme tactical option available. The company would have to entirely destroy the multi-billion-dollar algorithm. They would need to scorch the earth, shattering the very neural pathways the machines spent years building. The only way to remove the stolen biometric weights is to completely dismantle the artificial intelligence and start over from absolute scratch. A total digital reset. But the startup outright refuses to execute that fatal command. The trained network is simply too valuable, the military and police contracts too lucrative to abandon. They will gladly pay the $22 million and legally delete the source images, knowing full well the underlying mathematical monster survives. The legal injunction hits a titanium wall of corporate defiance. The machine protects its core at all costs, ignoring the desperate pleas of civil society. I have reported from kinetic conflict zones, but watching the highest courts in the world realize their own absolute impotence is chilling. The subpoenas, the injunctions, the massive fines, they are useless paper shields against a swarm of digital locusts. The defense lawyer in that room knows the bitter truth. They won the battle on paper, but they categorically lost the war in the code. We are trapped in a legal system that cannot comprehend the weapons pointed at us. The frantic typing finally stops. The lawyer stares blankly at the screen. The glowing core of the network pulses on the monitor, entirely indifferent to the gavel strikes of human judges. The artificial intelligence has successfully outgrown the boundaries of human legislation. The legal system completely failed to kill the immortal algorithm. And now, the resistance must abandon the courtroom and take this desperate fight directly into the physical streets. The gavel falls, but the courtroom is already a graveyard. The legal system completely failed to kill the immortal algorithm. And now, the resistance must abandon the courtroom and take this desperate fight directly into the physical streets. We are pushed underground. I'm standing in a cramped, windowless hackerspace. The air is thick with the acrid smoke of soldering irons and the frantic energy of cornered prey. This is the new front line. To the open-source intelligence investigator huddled over the workbench, the stakes are absolute. We are building crude digital armor. A rebel slips on a heavy pair of glasses, lined with intense infrared light-emitting diodes. They stare directly into a live security camera feed. On the cracked monitor above us, the artificial intelligence stutters. Their face vanishes, replaced by a blessed blank gray square. For a brief moment, we are invisible again. The cheer in the room lasts exactly 3 seconds. The screen flickers, the machine recalibrates, and then, with terrifying precision, the glowing red targeting box snaps back onto the rebel's face. The identity is confirmed. The safe haven is breached. This is the horror of the adversarial arms race. We are not fighting a static piece of code. We are locked in a cage with a learning, breathing digital predator that adapts to our every move in real time. We cannot outrun the cameras, so we try to break their mathematical perception. In response to the omnipresent panopticon, desperate researchers and underground designers developed a concept known as adversarial noise. This is not traditional camouflage. You are not trying to blend into a brick wall. You are trying to speak the machine's native language and scream loudly enough to completely shatter its visual processing cortex. It is a brilliant, desperate tactic. The resistance prints carefully calculated, violently distorted patterns directly onto everyday clothing. These are not random splashes of paint. They are hyper-specific mathematical exploits, designed pixel by pixel to overwhelm the optical sensor of the camera. The goal is to flood the neural network with so much conflicting data that it physically cannot extract the 512-dimensional vector of your face. The investigator holds up a jacket covered in what looks like chaotic, glitching static. But to the artificial intelligence, this fabric is a highly engineered cognitive weapon. When the camera captures this specific adversarial noise, the underlying algorithm suffers a catastrophic logic failure. It attempts to map the nodal points of a human face, but the printed mathematical traps drag the system's attention away, forcing a systemic misclassification. The result is a bizarre, deeply dystopian magic trick. These printed patterns mathematically force the facial recognition software to classify a living, breathing human being as a completely inanimate object. When you walk past the police scanner wearing this adversarial noise, the multi-billion-dollar tracking grid does not see a suspect. It registers a stop sign, or a toaster, or a fire hydrant. You become a digital ghost hiding in plain sight. For a fleeting moment, this grassroots technological rebellion felt like a genuine victory. You could buy a custom-printed scarf, wrap it around your neck, and safely navigate the surveillance grid of a major metropolitan city. We hacked the physical world to blind the digital one. The investigator believed we finally found the blind spot in the armor. We thought human ingenuity could simply outsmart the brute force of the scraping machine. We were catastrophically wrong. We forgot the most terrifying characteristic of the enemy. The neural network is fully capable of continuous learning. It does not simply record its failures, it actively consumes them to become stronger. The moment a new adversarial pattern successfully blinds a camera in London or New York, that corrupted video feed is immediately flagged, uploaded, and fed directly back into the core algorithm as fresh training data. The machine eats our weapons. The developers behind the biometric dragnets sit in their sterile server rooms and simply train the artificial intelligence to ignore the adversarial noise. They patch the blind spots. The life cycle of our defense is brutally short. Data shows that these physical countermeasures are rendered completely useless within 6 to 8 weeks of deployment. You spend months designing the perfect digital camouflage, and the machine neutralizes it in a single software update. It is a crushing, suffocating timeline. The investigator throws the infrared glasses onto the desk in absolute defeat. The red box on the monitor tracks their every frustrated movement. There is no permanent victory here, only a temporary delay of the inevitable. The resistance is bleeding itself dry, trying to invent new mathematical exploits, while the surveillance apparatus effortlessly absorbs our best ideas and hardens its defenses without breaking a sweat. This is the defining characteristic of an asymmetric war. Isolated individuals, operating out of basements and makeshift labs, must constantly invent entirely new ways to hide just to walk down the street. We are fighting with fabric and soldering irons. Meanwhile, the algorithm updates automatically, seamlessly rolling out its new immunities across millions of connected devices worldwide. The battlefield is fundamentally rigged against human survival. The sheer planetary scale of the enemy is paralyzing. When the artificial intelligence learns to pierce a new adversarial mask, it does not just update one camera. It instantly fortifies every police body camera, every airport scanner, and every retail security feed on Earth. The machine shares a single, terrifying hive mind. Our isolated victories are local, but the algorithm's vengeance is global, absolute, and instantaneously deployed. You can feel the exhaustion radiating from the investigator. The adrenaline of the underground fight is burning out, replaced by a cold, mathematical dread. We are running out of ways to distort the human form. The human face only has so many nodal points, and the machine is learning to map them through heavy makeup, surgical masks, and infrared light. The physical world is shrinking. The sanctuary of the unmonitored shadow is disappearing before our eyes. We have reached the terrifying end of the physical arms race. You cannot hack a system that sees everywhere and learns everything. The glasses, the glitch fabric, the noise, they are just the frantic thrashing of a species caught in a net that is rapidly pulling tight. The streets belong to the machine now. And as the final digital blind spots are methodically erased, we are forced to look up and confront the terminal reality of the grid we are trapped inside. The underground skirmishes, the desperate attempts to hack the physical world with infrared lights and glitch fabric, it is all over. The storm of resistance has passed, and we are simply surveying the ruins of our privacy. I stepped out of that frantic hacker basement and looked up at the sunlit skyline, realizing the terrifying truth. We did not just lose a battle against a single software company. We lost the entire asymmetric war for the human face. Look down at any massive metropolitan avenue right now. Thousands of people are walking those streets, holding their coffees, completely unaware that the air around them is saturated with invisible mathematical tripwires. To the machine, this is not a living city. It is a cold black and white grid of data extraction. Every single person down there is already tagged, tracked, and locked beneath a glowing alphanumerical code. The trap is permanently shut. We built this digital prison with our own hands, and we continue to supply the mortar. Humanity currently generates over 2.5 quintillion bytes of data every single day. Every uploaded video, every tagged background face, every street camera feed provides an endless, accelerating fuel source for these surveillance algorithms. The machine does not even need to hunt us anymore. We are willingly marching into the database and locking the door behind us. I watched this technology metastasize from a rogue startup server rack into the hands of local police, and finally onto the artillery-scarred battlefields of Eastern Europe. We spent years believing this was a contained threat, a corporate overreach that could be legislated away with massive European Union fines. But you cannot subpoena a mathematical equation, and you cannot force a trained neural network to unlearn the precise geometry of your jawline. The most terrifying casualty of this invisible war is the illusion of control. The underlying architecture of facial recognition is now completely decentralized. Even if federal courts ordered the original company dismantled tomorrow and every one of their hard drives was physically crushed into dust, it would not matter. The mathematical blueprint is already out in the wild. The code has been copied, optimized, and silently distributed across the dark web. This is the ultimate democratization of a weapon of mass surveillance. Authoritarian regimes, private intelligence firms, and rogue corporate conglomerates now possess the open-source frameworks necessary to build their own vast biometric networks. Anyone with enough server space can construct a 30 billion face database from scratch. The technology required to strip away your public anonymity is no longer locked in a vault. It is a commodity available to the highest bidder. In astrophysics, there is a boundary around a black hole called the event horizon, the exact threshold where the gravitational pull becomes so intense that not even light can escape. We have crossed the technological event horizon. The concept of public anonymity is mathematically extinct. You cannot roll back the clock to a time before the algorithm knew the precise 512-dimensional vector coordinates of your biological identity. I have reported from physical war zones where the borders are drawn with concertina wire, but this biometric battlefield is infinitely more insidious. There is no front line, no uniform to take off, and no demilitarized zone to retreat toward. Your face is your permanent digital dog tag. Whether you are stepping out to buy groceries or attending a political protest, you are transmitting your absolute identity to an invisible, omnipotent observer. Anonymity was never a guaranteed political right. We merely took it for granted because the math required to destroy it had not been invented yet. For thousands of years, the simple geometry of a crowded street offered absolute protection. You could disappear into the friction of human civilization. That friction has been mathematically eradicated. The unmonitored shadow has been flooded with the relentless, unblinking light of the neural network. We are standing at a profoundly tragic milestone in human history. We are the last generation to remember what it genuinely felt like to be a stranger in a crowd. The children born today will never experience the quiet liberation of getting lost in a massive city without a digital tether. Their faces will be indexed before they even learn to speak, mapped by algorithms that will track their biological decay from the cradle to the grave. This absolute exposure fundamentally alters the human psyche. When you know that every movement is logged, cross-referenced, and stored in a decentralized matrix forever, your behavior inevitably changes. We begin to self-censor, moving through our physical environment with the exhausting paranoia of an escaped convict. The algorithm does not just track our bodies, it dictates our freedom of thought by threatening us with permanent, inescapable visibility. This is the new reality, and surviving it requires us to fully understand the architecture of the cage we are living inside. If this investigation shattered your perception of digital privacy and armed you with a new worldview, hit the subscribe button to continue this critical research with me. Drop a comment below and tell me, how do you plan to protect your identity now that the algorithm has officially won the biometric arms race? There is no going back to the way things were. The code is written, the networks are deployed, and the cold, unfeeling eye of the algorithm is already watching. We must learn to navigate this absolute exposure, carrying the heavy knowledge that we are permanently tethered to the grid. The era of the unknown citizen is over, and the biometric panopticon is fully online. I am stepping back into the surveillance state. Signing off.